31-year-old man who admitted to killing victims in his apartment, then dismembering their bodies, may have murdered up to 17 people.
A serial killer is on the loose in the Daytona area.
Investigators are on the trail of a possible serial killer.
A stunning claim from an accused killer awaiting trial in Pennsylvania.
And authorities believe they could very well have a serial killer in custody.
And they say it may be the work of a serial killer.
An accused serial killer.
Welcome back to another episode of 5 Minutes of Murder, my little humble corner on the corner of the internet where I take a few minutes, yes me, Daddy Longlegs, out of my busy full-contact checkers career to inform you about one of the world's real-life monsters. That of, you guessed it kids, the serial killer. On this special April episode, we're going to hop right to it, right into the springtime madness with our homie, your homie, Ohio's own, James Ruppert, also known as the Easter Sunday Killer, who was responsible for the Easter Sunday Massacre, in which he brutally murdered 11 people, all of them one day in 5 minutes. James was born March 29, 1934, in a somewhat rural area of Hamilton, Ohio. He was a normal-looking person, all of 5 foot 6 inches, 135 pounds, and he basically seemed invisible to the rest of the world. All except the super thick rimmed glasses, he was virtually indistinguishable in appearance. You could be in a room with him and not even notice he was there. As a child, James grew up pretty poor. His entire family basically lived in this weird barn-like structure and worked on this farm. The house lacked indoor plumbing and running water, so you can imagine. James's father, as an occupation, raised chickens. This posed a problem because at a very young age, James developed a breathing disorder, which caused him to have asthmatic attacks around the chickens. Now, due to this, he was separated from his family at home, and of course separated from most other children. He was not allowed to play in gym or play any sports in school. Well, this didn't work well. It didn't take long before his little behavior branded him a sissy by the other kids, who basically routinely punched him, beat him up, teased him. He was a laughingstock at that. The only man who could actually help teach James was his father, but at the age of 12 years old, James's father died from complications due to tuberculosis. Now later, much later in life, James told a psychiatrist that soon after his father's death, his mother would taunt him and beat him, and that she would encourage his brother, Leonard, to do the same thing, which caused James to develop paranoia and sadness, of course, into deep depression. His mother made it very clear to him at that time that she wanted another daughter, and that his presence was a mistake. Even after high school, James's mother showed much more love to the older son and nothing to him whatsoever. It became a constant reminder that James had inadequacies, that he was nothing in her eyes. Now fast forward this to James's adulthood. He never finished school, he dropped out of college, he couldn't hold a job, he was unemployed, he lost all his money in the stock market. James was forced to move back in with his mother in a small 2-floor home located in Hamilton, Ohio. James's paranoia worsened, and he continued to blame all of his life's failures on basically conspiracies, that his brother, his mother, and the government were out to get him. For many, many years he was under psychiatric care, but the psychiatrist never saw any flags because there was no sense of violence, no anger. Then on March 29th, it marked James's 41st birthday in 1975. He went to meet with his girlfriend at the time, a girl by the name of Wanda Bishop, at this club called the 19th Hole Cocktail Lounge. He basically proceeded to get horribly drunk and tell her all about his money problems. Whatever, he didn't have money, so not so much a problem. The next day was Easter. It was March 30th, 1975, and James was sleeping off another hangover. That's basically what he did. He was awoken from the sound of his relatives coming in and out of the house in the kitchen, slamming the door, going back and forth, lots of children basically running around. Leonard Ruppert and their 8 children basically spent church that morning for Sunday Easter Vigil. They drove up in a black big van and unloaded and started coming in and out of the house. Once they piled out of the vehicle, they were getting ready to visit grandmother. How great is that? And have a giant Easter egg hunt on the front lawn. How cool is that, right? Easter egg hunt's fun. The unfortunate thing is shortly after that hunt, James would start his hunting. It was in that moment James would begin to, well, prepare. Minutes later, at 4 p.m., James Ruppert walked down the stairs in what appeared to be no prior planning or no premeditation. He was carrying 3 revolvers, one of which is a .357 Magnum, and the other 2 were twin .22 caliber handguns. He also had with him a Marlin Model 60 18-shot rifle, which he immediately propped up against the refrigerator door. Now, in the kitchen, Charity Ruppert was fixing sandwiches at the kitchen range. Leonard was with his wife sitting at the table, talking all about Easter. Their youngest child was in the bathroom at the time, while one of their daughters was waiting by the door to sort of take her turn and also to keep an eye on the younger children. The other 6 children were at play in the living room, having a great time. Before anybody had a chance to think about it, James Ruppert entered the kitchen and opened fire, stopping only to reload. The first round was a disabling round, meant to take them down. The second and third rounds were to finish off his victims, and he did. 10 of them were shot in the head, all at close range. One of them was shot in the chest, as James emptied all of his 31 cartridges, and his family. Nobody screamed, nobody ran, nobody reacted, nobody had time to do anything. They were all just dead under 5 minutes. That's it, 5 minutes, gone. The victims were James Ruppert's mother, Charity, at 65, his brother, Leonard, at 42, Leonard's wife, Alma, at 38, and Leonard's 8 children, Anne, Carol, David, John, Leonard III, Michael, Teresa, Thomas, and all of them gone. All of them ranging from ages 4 to 17 years of age. By this time, the victims had completely bled out. There was so much blood in the house, it was basically everywhere. So much so that the blood started leaking in from the floor down to the basement, where actually traces of that blood can still be seen in that basement today. At 9:41 p.m., James finally called police. He spoke to an officer and said, "There's been a shooting here." The police came pretty much immediately. No one in the neighborhood heard anything. Basically, because of Easter, most people were out. Nobody reported the shots, no one reported anything. James just sat there at his kitchen table amongst his victims. From what we understand by local police, it was a gruesome scene. Minutes later, the detectives were there, and James Ruppert was standing there inside the front door of his house. From there, the officers could see everything from behind him. They noticed blood splattered everywhere, 5 bodies laying there, and then as they entered the house, there were 6 more bodies in the kitchen. There they would also find the pistols sitting there in the living room, and the rifle was still propped up against the refrigerator door, as if he never touched it when he did. It was purely a creepy sight. The police had the suspect in hand at this point, and they cuffed him and they brought James to jail. Police Chief George McNally added, James Ruppert was placed under arrest, and at that time he was as submissive as he could be. Once he was in custody, he was charged with 11 counts of aggravated murder, but he refused to talk to police about anything. And he pled guilty later on to not guilty due to reason of insanity. During the trial, prosecutor John Holcomb said, "When I walked through the front door, right into the middle of that carnage, I saw a little boy, 4 years old, with a blue bib corduroy overalls. He was wearing a long-sleeved blue cotton shirt, lying on the floor, feet away from the couch or so, 1 or 2 feet. His hands was stretched out, he had a bullet in his head, and in his outstretched hand was basically a half-eaten, half-unwrapped, tinfoil purple chocolate Easter egg. He said that was a sight that shook him down to the depths of his soul, and he would never forget it. No matter what he tried to do, it would be with him for the rest of his life. Although he pled insanity in what was described as a 3-ring circus of a trial, James was found guilty of first-degree murder of his mother and his brother. But the prosecutors did not seek the death penalty at the time because it was obvious there was some sort of mental impairment. They just couldn't tell what it was.
Along those same lines, Doctor, isn't it true that you have no way of telling the court what Mr. Ruppert's ability to rationally discuss the case with his attorneys, to rationally assist in the preparation of a defense?
At that point, he was sentenced to 11 life terms and placed in the Allen Oakwood Correctional Facility. All of his victims are buried right next to each other, put to rest at Arlington Memorial Gardens, 2145 Compton Road, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45231. On June 24th, 1995, the Ohio Board of Parole rejected James's request for a reduced sentence. Then again, they quickly denied it again in 2015 when he tried one more time. But, basically the same ends, denied. Now, 81, James Ruppert sits and rots in Allen Oakwood Correctional Institute in Lima, Ohio. His next parole hearing is scheduled for 2035, and if he makes it that long, he'll be 101 years old. If you would like to contact James Ruppert, not sure why, you can do so by writing a letter to the Allen Oakwood Correctional Facility, care of James Ruppert, 2338 Northwest Street, Lima, Ohio, 45801. Hopefully he'll die behind bars, but who knows. Now, on a lighter note, in the house where the 11 murders took place, that house still stands there to this day. Now, there's claims of the house being haunted. The first family that moved there were not told about any of the murders whatsoever, but they left the house within a month because they kept hearing voices and other noises in the home. Other families have moved in and moved out quickly, but none stayed that long, unfortunately. Not quite sure why. But the house was abandoned only until November of 2014, where a tenant took place, and she still lives there to this day, and still reports absolutely nothing unusual about it.
It's a spectacle. It's a sightseeing type thing. You know what I mean? So a lot of times around Halloween, people will just start driving by, start thinking of haunted Ohio. You'll see people, like, they'll park down the street and walk up and down both sides of the street. Sometimes inconvenient when you're walking out to go get lunch with your son and someone just walks right up, you know, and they want to have a talk about the house or something like that. But, you know, it doesn't happen all that often. A lot of people think I'm crazy for living here, but it's not creepy. It's my house. It's my home.
If you happen to be in Hamilton, Ohio area, you may swing by and check out the house. Its address is 635 Minner Avenue, Hamilton, Ohio, 45015. But on second thought, maybe you might want to stay away from those houses. Maybe it's better left to let them stay, you know. Okay, you never know what's going to be lurking around those things. Let sleeping dogs lie. So there you have it, folks, another epic episode of 5 Minutes of Murder. I sure hope that you enjoyed watching it, as I always remember to, or I always like to bring it to you. Now remember to always lock your doors and windows, because even at Easter time, you never know when your 5 minutes are going to be up, and you see what can happen in 5 minutes, y'all. Peace.